I would say good morning, but I think we're now like approaching noon at this point, so we've got good energy going. Love it. Quick intro for me is I am the CEO at Grid. Grid is the only digital news company that's actually exclusively focused on helping sophisticated audiences actually understand the context behind the headlines that everybody reads every morning. So we're here because we work with a lot of public affairs and brand marketers who leverage Grid through advertising and sponsorships to really engage with smart, engaged audiences on a platform they rely on to understand the world around them. Thrilled to be here with you, Tia. We're going to get a little bit more into your background, which is diverse and exciting and interesting in a second. But I actually wanted to start at a high level with Square. So I don't think that we need to explain Square to folks here. I think everybody has interacted with Square at some point. The company's evolved and changed a lot over the years, right? It's about, what, 12-ish years old now?
Actually, a little older than that, because 2009.
Okay, wow,
Yes,
all right.
14.
Wow, 14 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Teenager. So it's evolved a lot. And I was actually watching a video of Jack Dorsey talking about the evolution of the brand during Investor Day recently. And he described it as kind of the initial idea being, let's get a credit card reader for a phone. And then he kind of was thinking about it, well, what's it actually doing? It's helping a seller make a sale. And then that kind of evolved into a broader mission of helping more sellers make even more sales. And so I'm curious, now that we're sitting here 14 years in, how do you think about the Square brand, its purpose? What does it represent today in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about a brand when it's founded with a very clear purpose, like Square was, of economic empowerment, and how do you make it easier for small businesses to start, run, and grow? That's still our mission. That's still, why we exist today. We've grown tremendously, right? Square is no longer a startup, right? We're a Fortune 500 company. So it's grown very fast, and it goes from the little white reader, which is, I think, what most people think of when they think of Square. So that's something that I don't even think about or talk about, because we have a whole ecosystem of tools to help businesses of all sizes. So whether you're a small business selling at a farmer's market to SoFi Stadium and Shake Shack run on Square, right? Because we have things to manage all of your customer tools, your staffing, all your back of house, of course, commerce, you can take payments anyway, but even banking, right? You can do your checking, savings, and loans through Square. So, a whole big complex ecosystem, but with the same mission of helping businesses grow.
That's awesome. Yeah, an entire ecosystem. I think that's a great way to think about it. And a lot of that is kind of behind the curtain if we consume it as a consumer, right? Yep. So this is obviously a sophisticated world in the fintech space. I was interested to find out that before you came to Square a couple years ago, you had a long and esteemed tenure at a lot of the world's biggest brands, but it was mostly in the CPG space. And so what was it like to transition as a marketer from largely consumer products and on the consumer side to going not only into fintech, which I'm sure has its own kind of complications and nuances, but also then in the B2B space, which operates differently from a marketing perspective? What was that like? What did you learn? What surprised you?
It was different. Very, very different. But the most interesting thing for me was realizing with fintech, and I think this is the case with a lot of tech, how underdeveloped they are in the brand development, brand marketing space, the lack of understanding across the organization of what brand marketing is and what we do and why we exist. And that was really interesting to me, because the more that I dove in on B2B, because this is my first, I've been in marketing 16 years, this is my first B2B experience. Brand actually matters more in B2B environments than B2C. And there's a ton of research that shows this and proves. And I was fascinated, because I was like, really? But then I started to think about it, and it makes sense, right? So let's think, if you're a consumer and you're going to the grocery store and you buy something and you hate it, okay, you return it or you just don't buy it again, and you're not out that much. But if a business is going to bring on a new tool to run their entire operation, it's a very long consideration process, first of all, several months. And then once they bring you on, think about how complicated and difficult it is, right? They've got to train all their employees on it. They've got to roll it out everywhere. And then if it doesn't work, right? Imagine that. So that's why brand is more important in B2B, and why they tend to focus more on brands that they know and trust. And so there's this interesting tension there. It was like these B2B and tech companies don't get brand. They don't realize how important it is, but all the research shows that brand is more important in B2B environments. And so how do I educate, the rest of the company on why we need to be leaning in here and what does that look like? Building it from the ground up. Like you mentioned, I worked in consumer, a lot of big CPG companies. I worked at IHG, I worked at Procter & Gamble, I worked at Kellogg's, I worked at others. I took for granted the foundation was there, right? I'm walking into brands that have a long history. Everyone has their equity wheel or their brand positioning, and everyone knows this, right? From the CEO, everyone knows, right? But when you walk into an environment where none of that exists and people don't even understand, well, why do we need this, right? It makes your job as a marketing leader a lot harder. So it was very interesting. It's been really fun building the foundation, right? Creating all of these things for Square as we began to really lean more heavily into brand.
Yeah, and so as you were going through that internal journey, right? Like what were some of the things that allowed you to break through and help people internally understand the value? Because I think that some of the things that some of those companies, particularly in the startup phase and those with high profile and charismatic CEOs often think, oh, they can take care of brand with earned, right? Like that, and obviously earned is an important component of
Yes,
marketing,
it is.
but it doesn't do all the lifting, right? And it's like, what were some of the things that you were able to do to convince people internally of everything that you just explained to us?
Yeah, a couple of things, right? So there's a lot of third-party research from a lot of marketing experts out here that people probably know, Les Binet and things like that, people like that. So sharing a lot of that research, because especially of a leadership team who's very data-driven and showing them that marketing is actually a science too, right? It's not all fluff as sometimes people believe. So starting there. I think the other thing that benefited me at least is in our space, it's become very cluttered, which I know is something people talk about in a lot of categories. But when you think about this space that we play in, you've got the Shopify's, the PayPal's, you've got a lot of new upstarts coming out. Toast, there's one I read about just yesterday. I can't remember the name, never heard of, but they're coming after our space. And so there's so many. And then when you look at the messaging, you look at the websites, you look at the create, everyone's saying the same thing. Everyone looks the exact same. Every single one. And so basically packaging all that together and saying, hey, I know we started this space, but if we're not careful, we will become Kmart. Kmart started their space too. And they took for granted that they were the big ones and that they were the only ones, and they paid no attention when Walmart came along. And where is Kmart today? Right? So it's real, you just have to be real. And and look at the growth rates of a lot of these competitors. Yes, we're still bigger. Yes, we're still growing. They're growing faster. How are we going to differentiate? This is where brand helps you. This is where we lean in and come up with our unique brand story and our unique brand proposition that we can tell that will then grow, people's affiliation and affinity to the brand. We want people to love Square, like Alan was saying, that's so important. And so that's how. It's a lot of storytelling, a lot of data, a lot of conversations trying to make people understand something that they don't, to really get them to say, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that the kind of the brand as differentiator in a competitive market is a hugely kind of under valued aspect of that. And so as you think about kind of those audiences, right, how you can leverage the brand to grow different types of audiences, I imagine that you have to kind of balance at least two different things. One is you have a core audience of people who you think are kind of very close to the center of your marketing circle, right? Existing customers and people adjacent to them. But also you have to keep your eye on what's next, what's on the horizon, who are the other pockets of potential consumers that you need to do so that you don't end up like Kmart, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that we've talked and that you guys are doing something actually really exciting to try and keep your eyes on the future. Do you want to talk a little bit about what excites you as far as growth right now?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer that as a brand, you need to be future focused. So you should always be dedicating a portion of your marketing resources to go after who is that future consumer that you're going to win with. A lot of companies say, "Oh, it's Gen Z," and yes, that's one of ours. But specifically, when we think about business owners and we think about entrepreneurship and where that growth is coming from, it is coming from Black and Hispanic Americans significantly. I mean, significant double-digit growth that far outpaces anyone else. The most businesses that have been owned in the past 3 years are coming from Black and Hispanic sellers, and so it's like, okay, this is an opportunity. So even at Square today, because like I said, we're not just for what we call micros, the really small businesses. We go after a lot of larger enterprises, and we're still doing that. But we need to be thinking about the future. And if the majority of entrepreneurs that are coming up are these audiences, what are we doing to go after them? So Gen Z is a focus for us, Black and Hispanic sellers. And we just launched a big campaign today this morning, actually, that is a business accelerator called Forward. And the intent is to support these Black and Hispanic business owners because although they are opening at the fastest rates, their businesses are less likely to succeed. A lot of it's due to a lack of access to capital, a lack of education. And so we said, well, we've got all those tools and expertise. Let's create a program to help them so that they can continue to grow and thrive. And we're partnering with Dwayne Wade, Rosario Dawson, and Aisha Curry to bring it to life. And so I'm really excited. I think I sent over the launch video that is going to be airing.
We know it's not easy. Black and Latino-owned businesses open at the highest rates. But not enough stay open. It's more difficult getting loans. Recessions hit harder. Most don't make it 18 months. But we still do it our own way. Because our businesses have the power to support our communities. We're the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. We did that. We're still doing it. And we're not stopping here. Because we all need more Black and Latino-owned businesses to succeed. Today, tomorrow, and every day. There's only one direction to go. Forward, by Square.
Awesome. Very cool. And it launched this morning. So you heard it here first.
This morning, yes.
Very exciting, I'm sure of it.
Yes.
That was there was a lot going on in the lead up. I'm sure everybody here is well aware of what goes into a big launch like that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that program, because obviously that's an important marketing opportunity from a growth perspective, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what does it actually represent for these 25, this initial cohort of entrepreneurs who are going to have these new resources at their disposal?
Yeah, so we launched today this video, obviously our influencers, and press release went out. And the goal is you have to apply to be part of this program, right? Because you're getting access to all this content, you're getting access to these celebrity mentors, teaching master classes. Because while they're all celebrities, they're all also entrepreneurs. You may not know, but they all have actual businesses, small businesses that they run. And so we're taking the first cohort of 25. We're excited. They will go through the whole curriculum, if you will. They'll go through the master classes. And then at the end of the program in June, there'll be this big celebration, almost like a capstone event, where they will all get to come together and network. We'll have at least one of our celebrity influencers there. And we'll invite other small businesses in the community, because this event's going to be in Miami, to come and, participate and to learn from the experience. So, it's all digital, virtual until you get to the final capstone program. There's obviously a lot of content because although we're just reaching those 25, we want this message to hit a broader group of business owners.
Yeah, and let's dive into that a little bit, right? So from a more of a tactical perspective, right? Like this program is obviously going to have a huge impact on those 25 entrepreneurs, their families, their communities, their customers. But for you all, how do you look at creating and thinking about this as a broader marketing opportunity, as a content generation opportunity? How do you actually amplify that in ways that are then trackable and meaningful for your business?
Absolutely, right. So it's things like this content being pushed out broadly. So yes, we'll only get 25 people who actually get to go through the program. We're hoping a lot more people apply. And we're hoping that it resonates, though, with other Black and brown businesses, whether they're just starting out or whether they're further along. It will make them look differently at Square, right? We know that a large majority of business owners will support brands that they are seeing out in the marketplace, that they see are talking to them and are supporting them. And so we're hoping that resonates. And so we get some ancillary revenue by someone choosing to sign on to Square because they love the fact that we're doing this program. I forgot to mention, we're actually giving capital as well through to the 25 business owners who participate, because we partner with Amex and they're going to give a $20,000 grant to each of these businesses to help them grow. So, we're filming so much content throughout. So it's the launch content we have. We'll get some UGC from the participants of the program so we can share their story and share their impact. We really want this to extend beyond just the campaign flight through June. And we're hoping that this is something that we can do regularly, right? Like maybe it becomes an annual thing to show our support. And so there's going to be a ton of content we capture at the event in Miami, and again, continuing to use that, pushing it out through our national media plans to keep this focus in the front and center.
Awesome, love it. And so when you think about the Black and Hispanic communities, right, this actually isn't Square's first foray into trying to target those audiences, right? About last fall, you all launched your first big national Spanish language ad campaign, looking at how you could target those communities in that way. Tell us about that. What drove that decision making? What was it like to actually kind of convert the platform and make sure it was fully accessible in Spanish? And then what did you learn from that campaign?
Yeah, so we've known since last year, right? There's a big focus. All the growth is coming from Black and Hispanic, and so we decided last year the whole company undertook this massive effort to create all of our products in Spanish. So before, like you couldn't go and see our website in Spanish, or all of our products, our software, you couldn't access it in Spanish. And knowing that there's such a large population of Spanish speakers in the country, it made sense. So this was a company-wide effort. And then in September, to align with Hispanic Heritage Month, we launched our first national campaign, to make people aware of it. And it was great. And so as in early Q1, when we started doing the analysis, a lot of questions we started having was like, well, are people actually onboarding with Square in Spanish? Because the other thing that, we didn't necessarily think about is a lot of Hispanic people speak English as well, right? They may be acculturated. And so does it have to be all Spanish language, or is it more about being culturally relevant to Hispanic sellers? And by the way, Hispanic sellers are not a monolith, right? There's Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Cuban, and you don't want to treat them all the same. So we started doing all this analysis in Q1, and now we're rethinking our approach. And I'll be honest, I don't have the answer yet, right? We've been reviewing a ton of data to figure out how do we want to show up if we're doing another dedicated campaign. Maybe it'll be in Spanglish. Yeah, I'm making that up. I don't know yet. Maybe we'll take a more localized approach instead of going national, and let's focus on 10 big markets. And instead of it just being media, we want to do pop-up activations. And so we're learning, right? Is it influencer? So that's what we're doing right now to really figure out how do we go deep, and what's the right way to approach this audience in a way that we will look not stupid, because you never want to do that, right? Especially with multicultural marketing, and look like we're actually making an effort to reach them where they are.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's like, it's so important to actually have kind of the humility and the confidence, honestly, to be intentional about looking at what you're doing, saying, this is something we haven't done before. And then being intentional about saying, what did we learn? Maybe we have to pivot. Maybe we had this hypothesis and we didn't get the answer we necessarily thought that we did, but then how are we spinning that into making sure that we're getting smarter the next time around, which I think is really, really important for everyone in marketing, right? Like,
absolutely.
Optimize, test, improve, measure.
Always.
Yes. Love to optimize and measure. And so on that front, I know that a lot of folks who are, when the marketing is focused more on actually converting sales, right? It's the metrics are in some ways clear, right?
Yeah.
You can point to it.
Absolutely.
When you're in more of the brand space, how do you think about setting up those KPIs so that you know that you are, actually testing a real hypothesis, that you're driving impact, but then you're measuring it and in a position to then improve over time? How do you think about that?
Yeah, there are so many different KPIs we look at, and we have to break them apart, right? We have primary, we have secondary, there's media metrics. So for example, for a program like this, right, the intent is to start to build a relationship with Black and Hispanic sellers over time, right, as they continue to grow. And so one of the things that we're looking at is, are we growing our awareness, consideration, familiarity? We're measuring that through our brand equity tracker, right? So we actually have added Boost this year to be able to have a stat-sig amount of Hispanic sellers and African-American sellers, so we can see, are we moving the needle over time, right? We get this quarterly data. And we turned it on in Q4, so we have a pre, as well as post. We'll look at media metrics. We'll do a brand lift study, right? Because we're obviously serving this to Black and Hispanic audiences. And so we'll look at our brand lift study. We'll look at engagement rate with the influencers that we use. We'll look at impressions. We'll look at the media pickup, right? The number of articles, those types of things. We'll look at website traffic, because this has a landing page where you can apply. We'll look at applications. We'll look to see if it's resonating. We'll look at sentiment, right? Because it's the first time we've done anything. So we've mapped out a whole list of KPIs that we're going to look at, right? Because this is a test and learn opportunity. And we're going to do surveys of the program participants and have them tell us, what did they gain? Did they feel like it was worthwhile? So we've got a ton of different KPIs and ways that we're going to be measuring the impact of this that will help us understand, what worked, what didn't, how do we pivot. I think the key thing to note with brand is oftentimes it's longer term, right? With the measurement, we're not going to have all the answers immediately. And it's making people comfortable with the fact that, hey, we are measuring, but we need to look at this over time to see if we're having an impact. And that could be tough, right? Because they were like, well, where's the revenue? Or are we generating leads? Well, we're looking at leads, right? There's a way that you can sign up on the landing page and fill out a lead form, but it's not our primary KPI because, again, we're just building the relationship. So it's educating folks on why we're looking at so many. What are the primary ones that are going to be the key indicators of success? Because that's the other thing, right? You can look at 20 different KPIs because there's so many components, but what are your primary, like what is really going to tell you if this was a success or not, and get alignment on that at the very beginning.
I love that. So one more question that kind of makes me, that I think of hearing you talk about all of this before we can get to some questions from the audience, which I'm sure we'll have, is that a lot of this really ties all back to brand purpose, right? It's longer term, but this is really an authentic expression of something that you and the company believe about the role that you should be playing in the world, right? That is enabled through this platform and through the things that you're doing. And so how do you think about placing purpose at the center of your campaigns from a creative perspective, from a campaign perspective, and how have you actually, to your point about, it has to be connected to the business at some point, right? Like, how have you seen centering purpose actually drive results over your career?
Oh, I have. Oh, so much. And this is why I feel like purpose should be at the center of everything you do as a brand, right? Your purpose, just like it is for people, it's why you exist. It's, and so when we think about that, why do we exist? We talk about economic empowerment for all. And we say all, right? Because there's people who benefit from the economy, but how do we make sure everyone has access to benefit from the economy? And so we talk about being able to power businesses through every opportunity. And how are we doing that? Through our tools, but even beyond our tools, right? It's not just about the product you sell when it comes to purpose. What are the other ways that are going to resonate with your customer or your consumer that show that you are adding value to their lives? And I think all brands should put that at the center of what they do, right? Otherwise, then why are you here? And so we do that at Square, right? And so it becomes a filter almost as a brand for how do you evaluate the things that you do? Does this tie back to our purpose? Does this tie back to what we know our customers need from us? If it doesn't, then why are we doing it? And so for me, I have seen that across my whole career, purpose has played a big role. I mean, no more so than during COVID. And I joined Square in 2021, so more so on the tail end. At Square was doing a lot during COVID, like pausing subscription fees for businesses, giving out free hardware, giving away loans to businesses to keep them open. We did a ton, and Square had some of its best performing growth in 2020, right? The company I was at, Walker and Company Brands, which is part of P&G, we make health and beauty products for Black men primarily. And a lot of our products are used by barbers. Barbershops were closed. And so we started thinking about, okay, how do we support the barber community, right, with programming and donations? And we also noticed that mental health was suffering from our consumers. Okay, we did a partnership with Headspace, right, free subscriptions to Headspace because people need help because they're struggling. And, very limited media spend, ton of impact. And we had our best performing quarter ever during 2020 when so many people's brands were like, how did you guys do that? It's like we leaned into purpose. And everything we did during 2020 is like, how can we just help our consumers? What is going to show that we really care about them? It wasn't about selling products. Like there was no catch to the Headspace thing. You didn't have to buy something first. It was just like mass, share out on social. Anyone who needs it, here's a link, free subscription to Headspace. And people are like, wow, they are really, really helping. And so that in turn drove business results. And so I've seen it happen multiple times over my career that when you lean into purpose and you show that you understand your consumers or customers and what they're going through and that you are actually looking to add meaningful value, your business is going to win every single time.
Love it. All right. I'm inspired just sitting here. Questions for Tia? All right.
You don't need a microphone.
Okay.
You talk loud.
She said, I project. Yep. It is something that we're looking into, right? We want to be able to track this first cohort over time to be able to see, like, did it have an impact, right? And that's why I said, going back to the measurement, there's some short-term KPIs, but some of it's going to be longer term to see, well, did it help them stay in business longer? Did it give them the education that they needed to be able to, grow their business? Those are the types of things that we won't know in the first month after the program completes. Yeah, I think there is a misconception that, oh, because you're B2B, you have to be boring, you have to be stale. Really, so there's another campaign we're launching next month. This is our national brand campaign, that is completely different from the style is different. It's really funny. It's, leaning into humor heavily, which, you're used to a lot of B2B brands being serious. But I think if you saw the Workday commercial from the Super Bowl, which was amazing, you don't have to be, they're an accounting and HR business, but you don't have to be stodgy to get your message across. I think for us, it's coming up with our unique brand identity. What does our brand color, look like? What is our style? So even things like Forward, where we have like almost like that amplified visual, like we have creatives who are trying to come up with ways to make ourselves look different, especially as we're seeing some competitors try to use our same color palette or same style. So it's like, okay, how do we continue to keep it fresh, stay true to who we are? So like we're making some updates, to our color palette. To further differentiate. Everyone's trying to use our market blue, as we call it. Okay, so let's still have it, but let's find other ways that we can make it pop. I think we do a lot of testing. This is something else I brought to script. They were doing no testing, no creative testing on anything. It blew my mind. And now we're like, test everything, to see, right, what is going to be impactful from where we were to where we are today, because that also helps give us the confidence to move forward. But I would say, don't think that it has to be flat and boring just because it's B2B. I mean, you still have to break through. And we all know what breaks through, right? It's unique, it's different, it's color, it's a unique style. And so you shouldn't be afraid to lean into that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tia. I was really interested in what you talked about when you shared a lot about connecting with multicultural audiences in relevant ways, and that really resonated with me. I'd love to hear about how you are working with digital media partners, and how you're utilizing different channels, and maybe a little bit about how and what partners are offering to you that is really reaching those goals, like solutions that they're bringing to you that are really resonating, to allow you to, I guess,
Reach them.
audiences in culturally relevant ways.
Yeah, I mean, we talk to a lot of partners. I mean, everyone uses Meta. We use Meta too. Google, right, big with YouTube, and they have multicultural capabilities. We're leaning into TikTok now, because everyone's on TikTok. I'm not. I shouldn't say that as a marketer. I think I'm just too old, right? But like, we're leaning into TikTok as well. We had conversations with like ABC Universal has a big focus on multicultural, so we talk to them. We look at specialized channel, Univision, right? We talk to, and our media agency helps us a lot with some of the different media channels that we're talking to. The Googles and Facebooks, we have direct, or Meta, I always forget that. We have direct relationships, but our media agency helps connect us to like the Univisions, the NBC Universals, and helps us understand what are the other media players who are leaning into multicultural and can help us there. So Wavemaker is our media agency, and so they also help make those introductions. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I guess, is there something that is really being offered? Like, is it a creative? Is
Got it.
Like, are
Yeah.
is there something unique?
It's targeting is that we really need, right? Because we do all of our creative in-house. We basically have an in-house agency model. There have been instances like we partnered with Google and used their YouTube creator program to do something that we did in Q4 targeting Black restaurant owners. So absolutely, like it's more about the targeting. Like, can you help us reach our specific audience? Do you know how? Because I will tell you, there have been some partners where it's like, you clearly don't get it. Like, I'm asking you for a media target plan. You're like, okay, well, we'll buy it against very generic, like hip hop owners and BET. And I'm like, what? Like, okay, help me understand. Like, I'm trying to find these Black business owners. Like, you're just showing me you don't understand, right? The culture. You're showing me you don't understand. And so we obviously don't want to work with partners like that. And so that's why we have a lot of conversations like, well, let's see, how are you targeting? How are you finding these people? And how are you showing up in the relevant placements that are going to make sense? Yeah.
So that,
I have two questions for you quickly. The forward program seems really tied to purpose. Was it tied to a key moment at all? Like in Black History Month just ended? Was this a seasonal effort or why the timing of
I love this question. And this is something we talk a lot about. And one of the things I really like about Square is that we don't just try to do our identity or diversity efforts during certain months, right? Because we think that can look disingenuous, like especially if you're only doing it then. So no, we didn't launch this in Black History Month. We're launching it in the middle of March just because to make it normal that you can do these things year round because these people exist year round. Right. And so that's why, like, it's about showing that, no, you don't just have to do all your efforts during Black History Month. Because as a Black woman myself, when I see brands like they're saying everything during Black History Month and they're silent the rest of the year, then I know you're fake and you're inauthentic. And so why would I support that? So we thought it was better to actually launch it outside. And so we are very intentional about supporting sellers all throughout the year. We may still do something during Black History Month, but it may just be something highlighting some Black sellers or something like that on our social channels organically, but not saying that we only do our big tent poles. Similar with Pride, like we'll do stuff during Pride, you'll see content, but we want to show that we're supporting these audiences throughout the year. So you'll see programs launch outside of June, right? And so that's very intentional. So I love that you asked that question. Yeah.
secondly, I'm wondering if you all are experimenting at all with ChatGPT.
Oh my God, yes.
Like taking a long time to invest, just want the little square plug and they might Google, how do I get payments? Are you all doing anything?
Oh man, this has been like the buzz ever since ChatGPT came out. Our CEO is obsessed. And there was like company-wide Hack Week, and Hack Week is where like people form all these small teams and you could just come up with ideas and pitch. There were some really cool ideas. All of the leadership teams had to write like a 6-page on how could you see ChatGPT impacting your area. So marketing, we had a lot of ideas. So yes, there's some cool stuff. I can't share it. Because we may try to launch some of these things, but I was blown away by the opportunities that this presents. And we have a lot of conversations about how do we do it in a way that's going to be safe because there's still a lot of bugs being figured out, and how are we transparent? Like we don't want to all of a sudden start using ChatGPT on the back end of like customer support stuff, and we're not telling people that, oh, actually you're not dealing with the human anymore, because now we do have human. So it's like, how do we go about it in the right way? But it is a huge focus. Yeah.
right here.
Yeah, I'm curious, when it comes to international, can you maybe, I'd love to hear how you approach new markets.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're entering, there may be some local competitors, but a newer brand, new brand.
Yeah. So we're in like, I think 6 international markets today, and constantly looking at new ones to grow. And it is tough. So what we've learned is you can't just come in and take like a national approach, right? So when we launched in France and Spain, which we launched in the past year, coming in and trying to nationally like isn't going to work. No one knows you. You don't yet have the visibility. Like in the US, you can walk into a business and see Square, and that helps. So we're pivoting to this win local approach, right? So what are the key DMAs within a country that we want to sort of blitz out? Like we'll do hardware seeding, so you start to see the Square registers pop up, and we can do a lot of local market, advertising out of home, especially because our budgets with a lot of these markets is smaller. And so that's the approach we're taking, right? So it's very, very different. Much more localized, do a blitz, partnering with sales to figure out how do you create some scale within one market and then expand. And so it's a very different approach than what we take in the US, but that's the way we've got to do it because we don't have, the name recognition or hardware product recognition that we have in the US. So how do you start to create it? Start small, localize. So win Paris, for example, and like, what does that require? Boots on the ground to really make an impact in that market and then build it out over time. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. So you mentioned coming from more established like brands. I'm curious to hear like your insight. Like, what was those conversations like coming into like a Square, like a more startup, right? Like, what were those conversations like with the CEO? Why do you need to do
but they were hard. They were really, really hard. And as I said, I was going back and trying to, my default is to always show them the data. So I said I've been in marketing 16 years. I had a whole other career before that. My background is engineering, right? That's my undergrad, is chemical engineering. I'm very, very data focused, measurement. And so I'm like, all right, how can I, and I knew that my CEO is also a former engineer. So how can I use data to educate and convince her this is why we need to do, right? So that's why I started digging it, because I had no idea about like B2B marketing, all the stats and the research around why it's so important, why it's so impactful. And so I started digging it. So like sharing that with her, sending her these white papers, and then showing even the data within our company, like as we started doing brand marketing and showing her how our brand marketing compares to a lot of our performance marketing. We actually drive more revenue per seller when you are exposed to a brand campaign than a performance campaign, significantly more. And it's like, look at this, so it's like trying to throw a bunch of data their way because it's harder to argue against numbers is what I have found. I can bring all the passion in the world, which I do have, but like data always helps.
So I believe Cash App is also part of like.
Yes, Block, the new parent name is Block, yeah.
Right. Is there totally B2C for B2B, like totally different, but in terms of their strategy, is there any like overlap in terms of what you can learn, and do y'all share that? You've
Yeah.
worked at some of these bigger conglomerates where I bet it's very competitive between brands. I'm not sure what it's like at Block, but.
Yeah, it's we are trying to do more of it because Cash App started as just a product from Square and then got so big they spun it out to be its own business unit. And they are much more heavily consumer, right? Because a lot of people use Cash App, but there's still ways that we can partner and learn. Like a lot of businesses are now taking Cash App Pay, and we acquired Afterpay a little while ago, and so how are we integrating that in? So there's a lot of opportunities to think about how are we presenting this evolved ecosystem that includes Cash App and Afterpay when we're approaching sellers, especially the enterprise ones, right? 50 million plus. That's where having like the support of Cash App and Afterpay really helps us differentiate and break through. So we do share. I'm not going to Formula One races with them, unfortunately, or you see them working with Kendrick Lamar and all these other really cool people because of their consumer, ads, and Serena, like they're doing a lot of really cool, big consumer stuff. We're not there yet, but there are still synergies and opportunities for us to partner. So yes, they've actually poached some of my marketing people over to the Cash App side. So they sort of serve as the connection point to help us see what are the ways that we can work together.
All right, how are we doing on time? Is that about it?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
Doing awesome.